Well, let's start with our first practical chapter, which is the organic modeling chapter, where we are going to learn how to model mainly objects with smooth surfaces, and mostly quite curvilinear and organic. So we are going to open a new Blender scene, and we are going to delete everything we have here. I'll remind you that we're using this add-on so you can see my keys, but I've put it on this side so it doesn't interfere with my creation panels. So we're going to start by making a fairly simple organic object, which requires very little precision, which is going to be some mushrooms with blades of grass. We're going to start by creating a circle. I'm going to create a circle here. By default, it comes out with 32 vertices, but something very advisable when we are modeling objects is to always try to do it with the least amount of vertices possible, since this way it will be easier to control in general. So I'm going to reduce it to 16 vertices. Okay, and let's scale it down and extrude it up. The idea with this is to make the stem of the mushroom, and then we'll extrude another circle to make the top part, which will be the cap. So here I'm going to scale it up a little bit. I'm adjusting the position, and I'm going to create a few loops with Control R to give it a little more organic silhouette. Remember that the ideal is always to work with as few polygons as possible. So don't put too many loops. Once we have this, we can add the subdivision modifier. I press Shift A, and we put subdivision surface, and we can set it to 2 levels of subdivision. This modifier is extremely used precisely because it smooths the entire surface of the models, so we can achieve very smooth surfaces, having little geometry in the original model. So here I'm going to scale it a little bit. Down here, I'm going to scale it more. I'm going to extrude another loop. I'll give escape, and then I'll scale it with the S to give me a little bit more geometry. Here, I just scale and extrude a little bit at a time until I get the shape. Here, for example, this loop can be scaled down on the z-axis, and a way to use the modifiers to see the geometry better is pressing this little triangle. When we press it, we can see better the vertices that we are manipulating. Well, here, we would already have the base of the mushroom. What we are going to do now is to grab this circle here. I duplicate it with Shift D. I extrude it. I press Escape, and I scale it. Let's do the top part of this mushroom. Here, I press E and Z to extrude it in the Z-axis. I do it again. I scale. I hide this little panel so it doesn't get in the way. And I keep doing this process a couple more times. I scale inward. And here in the center to close it, what I can do is activate this little button, which is the Auto Merge Vertex. I'm going to extrude, scale, and I press the 0 key so that it scales it at the 0 point of everything. And when all the vertices are together and I release it, it will be collapsed by this Auto Merge option. So here we have the silhouette of this mushroom. We can improve it a little bit. We can grab the whole top part and scale it. I can also scale this stem. There's a shortcut, which is Alt-S, to scale in the direction of the normals. And so basically we're going to thicken it. I can make small adjustments this way until I feel comfortable with the shape of the mushroom. I'm going to make it a little bit thinner and put one more loop on it so that it's a little bit rounder here. Here we have the basic shape of the mushroom, and we're going to make a little composition with several variations of the same mushroom. I'm going to duplicate it. I can scale this one. I'm going to move it over here and rotate it. I'm going to duplicate it again, rotate it, scale it a little bit to put several mushrooms, more or less in the same position. And I'm going to do it one more time to have a fourth mushroom. And at this point, we can continue to make adjustments to each one in edit mode to make them a little bit different. This initial one I can make a little bit bigger. And something that also serves us a lot for organic models is to work not only in object mode, but also in sculpt mode. Then I select all my objects. I press Ctrl A to apply the scale. This is so that the scale transformations are reset and they are back to 0. And now I come to sculpt mode. And with the G key, which is the graph tool, I can adjust and make small adjustments to the surface to make these mushrooms more irregular. I can do the first one like this. I'm going to try to generate a little curve here in the stem. And to switch between objects, I press Alt-Q. I press Alt-Q, and I switch between different objects in sculpture mode. Here I am trying, then, to make all the mushroom hats. I'm trying to make them more or less horizontal. I'm going to do the same with this one. I want to make this one a little bit higher. I want them to be different from each other. Okay. And Alt-Q for the first one to make it more irregular. Make it not so rectilinear. Objects have much more visual interest when they have this kind of irregularities. That's it. So here we did the variations. I'm going to bring them a little bit closer again, so that it looks like they're coming out of the same place. I press double R here to use the free rotation, and I'll zoom them in a little bit more. Then that's it. Here we have a first composition, where we have some variations of the same mushroom. And now we're going to make the little leaves. For the leaves, we can just create a plane. I'm going to move it over here, and I rotate it by pressing Control to align it at 90 degrees. And I'm going to scale it. I'm going to press S and Z to scale it in the Z axis. And I'm going to put a couple of loops with Control R, and I'm going to scale them to create the silhouette that is going to be a little leaf. Here I extrude, and I scale once more, and I add the subdivision surface modifier. I'm going to add 2 levels of subdivision. This edge here, I move it down and scale it, and I have this silhouette. Now I want to give it a little bit of irregularity, so I'm going to go into edit mode. I press the Alt-Z key to go into X-ray mode, and I'm going to curve it a little bit, like this. Give it a little bit of curve to make it more visually interesting, like this. I'm also going to put the solidify modifier to give it some thickness. I increase the thickness here, and finally I'm going to put another modifier, subdivision surface, to smooth the whole surface. Ready then, this little leaf is simply a matter of placing it around the mushrooms. As the point of origin of this leaf, it's here in the middle, I'm going to go into edit mode. I select everything and move it up, so that the origin point is basically at the bottom of this leaf. And so it's going to be easier to manipulate it. I rotate it with double air, for example, and I rotate it always having that point as the axis of rotation. Here I'm going to duplicate a few of these little leaves to put them around the mushrooms. I try to have them in different sizes. I can also, in sculpture mode, make some longer ones. And I repeat this process a couple of times, until it is well integrated with the mushrooms. Well done. To know if it is looking good on the surface, I'm going to create a plane. I'm going to scale it a little bit, and I'm going to use it to move these objects that are not well on the surface, so that they are well positioned. With Alt-Q, I enter each one of them, and I adjust them in sculpture mode. Then that's it. Here we are, finishing this first composition. Here, I can select everything, and I put the smooth shade. Remember that I have it saved in the quick favorites. And to create a render of our scene, we can create the light from scratch, as I explained in the previous section. Or we can add to this file the collection that I left in the downloadable resources. I'm going to do that, so I come to File, Append, And I look for the scene that I left you for that. It's this one right here. It's called Lighting Scene. We're going to come to Collection, and we select Light Scene, and it exports right away. This whole collection, which already has some lights set up and a background surface, I'm going to hide it for a moment to delete this square. And I scale all these objects a little bit so that they fit better with the new collection. And I go back and turn it on. Then I'm going to arrange the scene. I'm going to put here the render view. I press the 0 key for the camera view, and I press Ctrl V to isolate only what we have in the camera. Here, at this moment, we are still using Eevee. Remember that we are going to change it to cycles. We activate the GPU here. I'm going to put the Denori on, I'm going to hide all these panels in this view, and I'm going to put some materials very simple to this scene. I come here to Shader Editor. For this background surface, I think we can use a color a little bit warm, something like this. For the leaves, I'm going to create a material, and I'm going to put a shade of green on it. Something more or less like this. I'm going to change it to material mode. You can see a little bit of it back here. And I'm going to adjust the color a little bit darker. And I'm going to select all the other leaves with a shift. I select last the one that I already put the material and press Ctrl L, Link Materials. This way it will copy the material of the active object to all the others. And the same goes for the mushrooms. We are going to put a new material on it as well, and quite simple. I create a new material, I'm going to look for an orange shade. And since I have all the mushrooms selected, I press Ctrl L, Link Materials. And for the base, let's find another material. I'm going to select this part with L. I add a new slot. I create a new material, and I'm looking for a tone slightly orange. And we assign it. Something more or less like this. Again, I select all the mushrooms, I press Ctrl L, Link Materials, and I select each of the stems. And we assign this new material to it. And from here, we can visualize it better. So that's pretty much it for this scene. The last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to adjust the camera a little bit so that my composition is well centered. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And here we are ready to render. I'm going to set the parameters here in the render. A sampling of 30, a threshold of 0.5, and in the color management, I'm going to put here medium high contrast and press F12. And that's it. Here we have the final result of our mushrooms. This is an introduction to what is the organic modeling mode, which consists mainly in modeling objects with subdivisions. The subdivisions are fundamental to be able to manipulate well a smooth surface for our models. With this model, we did it in a very free way, but in the next video, we are going to model some objects also with this method, but they are going to be objects that are going to have more control and precision. So see you there. Well, let's start with our first practical chapter.